Hi, Gary. Thanks for coming on with us.
Hi, Jay. Thanks for having me.
If you're a music fan, you'll love this book. If you're a Beatle fan, you won't put it down. Gary, I want to get right into your friendship with George Harrison in the book Dreamweaver, Music Meditation, and my friendship with George Harrison. Your honesty and sincerity comes right through. You weave in, no pun intended, your spirituality with your real life ups and downs. Tell us about that moment when you first met George Harrison in that studio, when you got the call to perform on his album.
Well, I had gotten a call from Klaus Vormann, who played on my first solo album, Extraction, and he called me, and I was I was producing an artist in another studio, and he said, "Gary, I'm in the studio with George Harrison, and we've just started George's new solo album, and we need another keyboard player. Are you available?" And I said, "Absolutely, I am." And got in my car, drove up to Abbey Road, and went into the studio, and there was George and Eric Clapton and Ringo and Billy Preston and a bunch of other people, and I felt totally intimidated. But George was he disarmed any feelings of apprehension that I had. He was such a kind human being. You could immediately tell he was very compassionate and thoughtful. And he said, "Take all the time you want to learn the song." And we went through it several times. I was making several mistakes, but finally I got through it. And it was "Isn't It a Pity" was the track we first worked on. And
Wow.
then he asked me to come back the next day and the next day, and I wound up coming back and playing on the entire album. George he started to pick up the fact that I was kind of interested in the vibe in the studio, because he was burning incense, and he had these pictures of saints, Indian saints and yogis, and I was just fascinated by that because I'd never seen anything before like that. And I think intuitively I was picking up, something that, like, I've known this person before. It's just too uncanny. And he kind of picked up the feelings I was having and started to give me books to read, and we were talking about Indian philosophy and the concepts of karma and reincarnation, all of which I thought were completely fascinating because I'd never really studied really didn't delve into any of that before. But it made total sense what he was talking about, and I became more and more interested. So that was kind of the genesis of our friendship, how it started.
He was the one that introduced you to spirituality on some level?
Yes.
Wow.
Yes, he was my mentor.
Wow. How many people can say that George Harrison, he was a mentor on many levels, not just music, but obviously spirituality.
Yes.
You can't turn on a classic hit station and not hear your Billboard hits Dreamweaver and Love Is Alive. I mean, your name is almost iconic to classic hits radio in some respect. And even, with pop culture, we'll get into the Wayne's World part of your life a little bit later. But after Dreamweaver and that success, you had a little bit of a bumpy ride. The next album didn't work out as well as you'd wished. You chose the wrong signal. I loved how honest you were. You said you were kind of smug and chose the wrong single. During the Dreamweaver success, were you connected to your spirituality then? Did you believe in God then? Tell me the transition from Dreamweaver, the incredible success, to the not success, and how that brought you to India.
Well, I had always believed in God. I just didn't know, the religious part of it that well. I was raised a Catholic, and that didn't answer a lot of questions for me. The concept of reincarnation wasn't in that religion, and it was kind of like, with Catholicism, you almost feel like you have one shot and that's it, and if you don't go to heaven or purgatory, you're finished.
Right.
And so I couldn't buy into that, and I was always curious as to, what the real truth was. So when I did Dreamweaver, I was overwhelmed with success, and I was in a rehearsal studio one afternoon, and some guy off the street who I'd never seen in my life before walks in and says, "Gary Wright, man, Dreamweaver. Do you know about Self-Realization Fellowship?" And I said, "No, what is that?" He said, "It's Paramahansa Yogananda's spiritual path." And that book by Paramahansa Yogananda, Autobiography of a Yogi, was one of the books that George first gave me. And I was fascinated when I read it. I couldn't believe the truths that it had. And my heart and my soul, I think, resonated with all the stuff that was in it. But I never knew there was an organization. And this guy, whose name was Dan Pierce, said, "Why don't you come with me tonight? They're having a special service over at this temple in Pacific Palisades," which was like a quarter of a mile from the Pacific Ocean. It was a beautiful, beautiful windmill chapel on a lake, and it was just, I thought I'd come home when I first entered there.
Wow.
And I joined the organization and have been a member since then. And that totally changed my life. And it was George really who was the one who lit that spark. And we both followed the path, actually, and later on in his life, and mine a little earlier. But it got me over the tumultuous periods of my career. And like you had mentioned before, the album right after Dreamweaver, Light of Smiles, didn't have the success that Dreamweaver did because of some kind of just quick decisions that were made that were not the right ones. So, and when you're so famous and you have that kind of success, and then you release something and it's not as successful, there's a huge letdown. But thank God for for me having joined the path, because I was able to cope with that a lot more easily than had I not been on the path.
What were the tools on the path that helped you cope with it?
Well, I think
Give me
learning
one.
how to meditate was the most powerful one, because it kind of kept things in perspective.
Meditation.
And
Wow.
I was learning how to meditate, and Yogananda, who I just spoke of before as having written the book Autobiography of a Yogi, he gave special techniques to practice where you can actually quiet the mind, quiet the heartbeat, quiet the breath, and when all that starts to happen and you go into these deep states of calmness, you begin to experience who you really are, and that is the soul. And that's what kept focusing in on that was the raft that floated me over the tough times that I was going through.